Hello, I'm Ann Gritch, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this segment of the oral history of the Diocese of San Jose. And with me is Sister Ana Maria Pineda. Sister Ana Maria is a Sister of Mercy and is Associate Professor at Santa Clara University and has been a longtime friend of the Diocese of San Jose. So I'm delighted that you're here, Ana Maria.
Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background? You were born in El Salvador?
I was born in El Salvador, and then when I was 2 years old, my parents came to San Francisco, California, and we settled in the Mission District. So I grew up in the Mission District. And the wonderful part about that was that the Mission District has been a long time Hispanic neighborhood with all this rich diversity of what it means to be Latino. So that was home for us for many, many years.
So what parish then?
St. Peter's Parish.
St. Peter's.
St. Peter's
Yeah.
Parish.
So you grew up in the Archdiocese of San Francisco.
I did,
Yeah, right.
and with the mission band at the same time.
Yes, tell us a little bit about the mission.
Well, I
band.
was very young at the time, but I remember having these wonderful priests come in and out of the rectory, and they had been traveling all over, I suppose, northern and southern California, and it would just seem like very exciting that this is what they were doing.
So you went to school in San Francisco?
I went to school at St. Peter's Elementary, and then at that time we also had St. Peter's Academy. So I went to St. Peter's Academy and graduated from there.
Okay, and then what brought you to the Sisters of Mercy?
St. Peter's?
The Sisters of Mercy were at
Sisters of
St.
Mercy
Peter's?
were at St. Peter's, so I found that as a very inspirational time in my life. So I decided to enter the Sisters of Mercy.
Oh, that's wonderful. So where were you then living January 27th, 1981, when the announcement was made that San Jose would become a diocese?
I was actually at St. Peter's.
Oh, you were, so you were in the Archdiocese.
I started out working at the elementary after I took vows, and then started to do parish work. So I was a parish sister, and I was that was what I was doing when I heard the announcement.
Any reactions?
Well, I had actually met Bishop Dumaine because he was auxiliary of San Francisco and had come to St. Peter's to do some confirmations and other kind of pastoral activities. So I had met him at that time. So it was quite exciting to hear that not only had he been named Bishop of San Jose, but that we had a new diocese. So there seemed to be that kind of pastoral and personal connection to the new diocese. It was quite exciting.
I can imagine. Now, were there any Sisters of Mercy in San Jose at that time in the new diocese?
That I don't recall.
I'm not sure either.
I don't recall.
That's so. How did you get to San Jose?
Well, because I had some connection with the Centro Pastoral in San Jose under Tony McGuire's leadership. I had attended courses there. The Centro had been offering courses and had been bringing in priests and other folks from Latin America. So I became acquainted with the Centro Pastoral in San Jose, met Tony McGuire and others that were working in the area, and also met Sister Gloria Loya. So we had had already several years of trying to collaborate and get together, and we had this little group, a social group. It was a social, prayerful group where we would gather priests and sisters that were outside of the United States, coming from Latin America. And this little group would meet like once a quarter, once a month in different places. So we had already established this connection. And Gloria had been speaking to me about coming to the South Bay and perhaps working in the South Bay. But I think neither of us could have imagined that it would have become a new diocese and it would offer those new possibilities.
I can imagine. In fact, can you tell us a little bit about the Centro Pastoral?
In its previous incarnation?
In its previous incarnation and its incarnation?
Well, the way I became acquainted was when it was housed at the Notre Dame High School, when Tony McGuire was the director of the Centro Pastoral. And then when the new diocese became a diocese, I got an invitation from Sister Gloria, who had spoken to Bishop Dumaine about the possibility of me joining this new endeavor that was now going to be the Centro Pastoral for the new diocese. So that's how I first came. And I don't recall, I may have been at the housing of the office at Notre Dame first for a brief while, but then we moved to Our Lady Guadalupe Parish, and the idea was to have 2 office sites. So one of the office site was there in the neighborhood, and we were able to be in this small little house, which was right there on the corner of the property of the Guadalupe campus. And then the other office was in St. Joseph's in Los Altos. So we would spend a few days in the neighborhood and then move to the office in Los Altos for the other days, so that we had this connection not only with the people in the neighborhood and the community in the San Jose area, but also with the other offices that had started
It was a diocesan.
in the diocesan office. Yeah.
That is terrific. So courses were given, and what kinds of things did the Centro do?
Well, we did several things. One of our first endeavors was to try and meet all the different pastors that were involved in Hispanic ministry. So Sister Gloria and I took time to have individual visits with the pastors to find out what their experience was, what their reality was, what their needs were. And then later we would have monthly or quarterly meetings with this group of priests and hear from them to be updated on what they were doing in Hispanic ministry, and then also for us to share some of our ideas. So one of the programs that we actually started was sponsored, not so much sponsored, but supported by RECOS, because RECOS at the time had decided to develop a mobile team for Hispanic ministry. And this mobile team got funding through RECOS. Father Ricardo Chavez was the director of the Hispanic Ministry Office or Endeavor out of Sacramento. And so we took advantage of this resource and developed what we called Instituto Liderazgo de Pastoral. And so people interested, lay people, men and women from the Latino community would sign up, and they would have to come like once a week, like on Saturdays we would meet, and we would take turns at different locations, but very often at St. Patrick's Parish. And so we developed a whole curriculum of theology, pastoral and otherwise, for them. And what's been really lovely is that even since those days, I mean, that was back in 1981 and so forth, I have occasionally met folks that went through that program.
Oh, how fun.
And have their certificate, and they will tell me, oh, Sister Ana Maria, I have my certificate in my kitchen or in my living room or in my bedroom.
That is great.
So that actually was the beginning days of what today is the ILM in that format. And many of those men and women then went on to work in catechesis in their parish, because at that time there wasn't any, I guess, much formation. So that was one of the elements that we started, the programs we started. I could tell you more. We also were involved in the Christian Family Movement in Spanish and the Engage Encounter in Spanish. That was another.
I think that's still going strong, isn't it?
Yes, it's still going
Encounter?
strong.
Yeah.
But that was another very important programs for us to work with, and retreats and other types of formation.
Were the pastors supportive? Did you have good relationships with the pastors?
I think we did. It was. I have to say, it was a very exciting time, and it was the first
brand new.
It was the first time in my life that I had actually felt really connected to a diocese, where it wasn't just a name that you heard and occasional reports that you would get, but we were really engaged and involved, and it was quite lovely. And there was a sense of that when we got together, there was prayerful reflection on what we were going to do. We took time out to be a community of colleagues and friends, but there was a sense of a Christian community that permeated our activities and our pastoral vision. We also had an interesting group of Latinos from Latin America who had gone through very difficult experiences, like in Chile, and they also became part of our endeavor. We were involved with youth, so there was youth groups like the Vicente Perez's sons were involved in that. So there were many activities that we either supported, we were involved in, that became part of the life of the Centro.
Exciting times.
Yes, it was.
Earlier you mentioned that you had known Bishop Dumaine from the days at St. Peter's. Sadly, he's not able to be with us, but can you tell us just some of your own stories about Bishop Dumaine?
Well, I remember when he first came to St. Peter's for the confirmation, it was for the Spanish speakers, and not only, but a good number. So he spoke Spanish and celebrated the sacrament in that language. And it occurred to me when I was watching him how taken he was with the tone of what the language could offer, and how accessible he became and was to the community that was gathered. So that was quite lovely, but he had great mastery of that language. And that served him very well, I think, in the Diocese of San Jose. And one memory that I had is, I don't know if you recall, but there was a terrible flooding. Must have been...
Was that Alviso?
Alviso.
Yes.
And so he actually made it a point to have the people of Alviso attended to. And he may have even gone to visit them. But the story that came out was that he had arrived in a boat and that he had checked out the situation from this boat. So in the memory of people, he was the pastor, the bishop pastor arriving in a boat and extending help and pastoral presence. But the people never forgot that. It was quite a loved memory.
Well, you know, when you mentioned his facility in Spanish, he did tell me several years ago that the greatest compliment he received, and I believe it was with a family gathering of yours.
Yes, it was.
And some family member said to somebody else, "The bishop's English is very good." He considered that one of the finest compliments.
It was my sister. It was my father's funeral. And he went and I think he might have done the final commendation, but he said final words, and he said them in Spanish. And then my sister later said, his English is pretty good too.
He loved that. He just loved that.
But it was true.
Yeah.
But the other part that I should mention that is connected to Bishop Dumaine is that when I came to the diocese and I became part of the Centro Pastoral, but we also have to remember there was Sister Jacinta, Sister Sandy Price had been part of it, Sister Conchita.
Oh, yes, Sister Conchita, I remember
her. Sister Catalina, and others. And then later we had a change of staff and other people joined us. But one of the very first things that we were asked to do was to celebrate a novena in honor of Our Lady of Guadalupe, that was going to be the beginning of the diocese. And Bishop Dumaine asked us to plan for it. And so a planning committee got established, and that was when I first met people from the diocese, like Linda DeMonte. Terry Davis was also working with us. She was in charge of the design of the programs. And we visited several different parishes and took the celebration to these different parishes. Wonderful. And as a result, every year from that time on, we would have a special Our Lady of Guadalupe celebration where there were processions that were involved. And the processions would start out from the different parish sites and then kind of come together to St. Patrick's, which was the cathedral at the time. And even today, that custom continues. Guadalupe. And a very lovely memory is, on one of those occasions, we actually had the Vietnamese community participate. So we had beautiful sacred dancing, but the sacred dancing on that occasion was done by some of the Vietnamese young women. So, because they had great devotion to Our Lady, and we felt that perhaps this was a way of bringing together the different cultural dimensions of the diocese. Yes. So that was another.
I do remember one year Father John Pedigo led the group from St. Catherine's. They walked from
Yes.
St. Catherine's up. It
Yes.
took them all day.
Yes.
Yeah, I just was, and I remember when they were announced, the place went wild.
Yes. And as they would come in, we would
Yeah.
cheer and clap for them, but
Exactly.
we never went as far as St. Catherine's. Ours were a little more modest, but still, it was
When you
quite
think,
a walk
oh,
for,
it's,
for,
oh
for
yeah,
people.
oh absolutely,
come
and
to.
often in the rain. I can remember some years when.
There is another, I think, important memory, and that is for the Bishops' Conference of the United States. They have a committee for Hispanic ministry, and Bishop Dumaine invited that committee to come to San Jose.
Oh.
And the purpose of that particular meeting was to write the Hispanic pastoral letter. And I'm forgetting the actual date. It might have been 1983. And that pastoral letter became entitled Hispanic Presence, Hope, and Challenge. And it was the first major Hispanic ministry document written by the bishops of the United States that belonged to the Hispanic Committee, speaking about the importance of the presence of Hispanics. But the other important part was to mention them not only as a blessing, but all the contributions that they were making, and to try and erase from people's thoughts and pastoral thoughts that Hispanics were a problem. And the bishop said, no, they're a gift. So that particular meeting was hosted and supported by Bishop Dumaine and took place in El Retiro. It took place in El Retiro. And Archbishop Sanchez was the chair of that committee. I served as the secretary for that committee. So
you were there from the birth?
From the beginning. So the Centro Pastoral made a contribution in that way, that I was loaned to provide that service, but it was a very important.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yes.
That is so good to know. That is terrific. Now, how did you get to Santa Clara, to the university?
Well, in 1984 or so, we started preparation for the Tercer Encuentro that took place in 1985, I believe. And I went to that encuentro, as I had gone to the previous one. And it became clear to me that one of the things we needed to do for the Hispanic community was to provide academic leadership. And so at that point, I decided that it was time for me to leave the Centro Pastoral and to go to further study. So I, with the support of Bishop Dumaine, left the Centro Pastoral and went on to study at Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, and then later to the University of Salamanca in Spain, and received my STD. And I actually taught and was part of the faculty in Chicago for almost 10 years.
Oh, wow.
But always wanting to come home. So at that point, there was an opportunity to come back, and I started teaching at Santa Clara University, but that was like 1997. So that was when I returned.
Because I remember it was a few years after that when you were the director of the graduate program in pastoral ministries, and Father Jack Bonser and I were charged with coming up with a program formation for the permanent diaconate. And I think Father Bonser was adjunct faculty at the time. And so we came to you, or he set it up, we came to you, and you were absolutely wonderfully supportive. And that our students are, to this day, are taking classes there.
Yes. Well, the Santa Clara University and the Graduate Pastoral Ministries program had a long history with the diocese. Much of that story is told and retold. There's different versions.
Of course.
But maybe a version could be that, inspired by the Second Vatican Council, the Jesuits at Santa Clara had thought that it would be good to establish some kind of program that would prepare men and women for ministry in the church. And it's coincided with the establishment of the new diocese. And because Bishop Dumaine himself had such a love for education and for the church, he had had a conversation with the president of Santa Clara at the time, and Father Rewalk. And I think Father Rewalk, in that conversation, asked him, well, what can we do for you? And Bishop Dumaine said, help me form the lay ministers for the new Diocese of San Jose. So all these converging interests and desires came together.
It's wonderful.
And that gave life to the Graduate Pastoral Ministries program, which actually has formed the majority of lay ministers who are working in the San Jose Diocese.
Both
and
ordained and non.
Exactly. So that's part of that history.
And I think it's a wonderful example of the relationship that the university and the diocese share, which I think is unusual, or let me say unique in the country.
I think that's very true. With Bishop Dumaine, there was always a great respect and mutual admiration for each other. The university was always very clear that the Bishop of San Jose had great regards for the university and for what it offered. And there were many opportunities for collaboration. And then when Bishop McGraw became bishop, it continued. So to this day, if there's anything that's happening at Santa Clara that we can provide service to the diocese, it is done, and vice versa. Bishop Dumaine was always very generous. When I started working at Santa Clara, if there was something that I wanted him to do for the university, he was so generous and accepting. He actually taught in the Graduate Pastoral Ministries program.
He loved it.
Yeah.
He loved
He taught
that.
the course on the church.
Yes.
And the students loved him.
Oh, yeah.
And Bishop McGraw has been the same. I've had several different events co-sponsored oftentimes with the diocese on the life of and legacy of Archbishop Romero and the Jesuit Rutilio Grande. And Bishop McGraw has always participated and been very gracious in doing that.
And the wonderful thing about our one of the wonderful things about our diocese is that we are compact, so that there are so many, as you said, students who are working in parishes, students who graduates from the university, who also know each other, know something's going on at Santa Clara, come. It's just a wonderful synergy.
Yes. When I was the director of the program, I had a board, and the board, advisory board, and the board was made up by a good number of graduates from the program that were working actively in the diocese. So that was always a very important perspective to keep going.
Absolutely. What changes have you seen in the diocese over the years that you've been involved?
I wonder sometimes, because of the many resources that this diocese has, that others do not have. I mean, you have a university. Others may not even have a college locally.
Right.
And so we have had riches of opportunities for further education and formation. And sometimes I wonder if we haven't taken that for granted. It's just become so second nature. But we don't always imagine that there are dioceses that don't have that. There's been a great turnover in staff since my time. I mean, I know a few people that I could remember from those early years. And the relocation of the offices, I think, has made a big difference. I don't feel as connected. They used to be right across the street.
Oh, it was wonderful. We used to go on our lunch hour to Mass at the Mission Church.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that part. There's always been a diversity, but perhaps the diversity is even more apparent today. And so I think it has new challenges. How do you respond to those diverse communities without putting to one side the communities that have had its attention and needs to continue? One of the major changes after I left was the merging of the Office for Hispanic Ministry, or the Centro Pastoral, into what was considered an office for multicultural. But sometimes that doesn't work. It becomes an office for
Whatever.
and doesn't attend to the needs of the people. Of course, it's also an aging diocese in terms of its clergy.
Yes.
And maybe the other dimension is we have to have new considerations for the youth that's an area that we still haven't pastorally attended well to, and or sufficiently, I should say, and which presents us with new challenges. So I think those are some of the changes.
I think you're absolutely right. I think technology has also had an impact, just in terms of rapid change.
Yes. But on the other side, with regard to the university, I see ongoing attempts to further educate teachers in Catholic schools and connecting it to the Department for Education. The Pastoral Ministries program has for many years tried to attend to current needs of the diocese. So you see those kind of efforts that still continue.
And the summer program, the Instituto,
yes,
is another one that we have certainly taken advantage of, and really are some of our people. In fact, a couple of our deacons went through that program, and just with their wives.
And that's a new development from this point of view, that since JST has now become part of Santa Clara University, last year and this year, the Instituto Hispano is being housed at the Santa Clara campus, and I think that's made a major change.
Sure.
Plus, you mentioned the use of technology, so there's been some kind of experimenting to see how you can use technology to connect with people who perhaps cannot come to the Instituto Hispano, or to provide some workshops using that medium. So those are new changes.
Yes. Yeah. It's an exciting time.
It is.
It really, really is. Now, Ana Maria, you are probably going to be too modest, but I'm going to push you. You recently received the Virgilio Elizondo Award from Actus, is it?
Yes.
Which stands for the Academy
of Catholic Hispanic Theologians of the United States.
All right. So number one, congratulations.
Thank you.
And number two, can you tell us about the award? I know Virgilio. We've met him through Santa Clara.
I know. So Actus began in 1989. The first meeting took place in Berkeley. And I attended the first meeting. Without knowing the implications of that gathering or what was going to happen. So Virgilio Elizondo is considered to be the pioneering voice and presence in the development of a Hispanic theology, which is written and created in the context of the United States experience. It has that dimension as a very important aspect to distinguish it from theology of Latin America. And at that first meeting, they established two awards. One award was the Actus Award, which is given to an association or an organization that promotes the values that Actus stands for. And the other award is the Virgilio Elizondo Award, which is in the name of the pioneering theologian in our group that established Hispanic theology on the map. And that award is given to someone for distinguished contributions to theology in the spirit of the mission of Actus. And that's the award that was given to me.
Well deserved.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And we're just proud that you're part of our diocese.
Well, it was very humbling.
I can imagine.
For a lot of reasons.
Yes, I can imagine.
Wonderful.
Colleagues there.
Yes.
So anything else we should be talking about? This has been a very rich conversation.
I don't, there's so much to consider, I suppose, with regard to the Centro Pastoral and the Office for Hispanic Ministry and its many contributions to the life of the diocese, and the many people that worked in it over the years. So I think that's important to perhaps keep pursuing.
We will be talking with Father Tony McGuire.
Exactly.
So I am sure he
and
will fill
in
in.
an interesting way, when the Centro Pastoral started, it began with efforts that continue today. Maybe it's taken on a different life form, but like the establishment I mentioned of the Instituto for Liderazgo de Pastoral, that was a very important beginning.
Oh, sure.
The importance of Our Lady of Guadalupe in the life of the parish and how you brought these different communities together, that was incredibly important. The concern for family life and the Christian family movement, or the Movimiento Familiar, that was another way of providing leadership formation. And I think our connection with RECOS and what was happening on the national level, because we were very involved in the encuentros as well, and retreats, the deacons and their wives. So, and our concern pastorally and personally for the priests of the diocese, especially those working in Hispanic ministry, that was always on the forefront. We tried to, in whatever way possible, to support them and provide them with resources.
Well, when I speak with the pastors particularly, they have great affection for the Centro Pastoral. Yeah. The older ones, the ones who remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think that's a good note for us to end. I thank you so much for taking the time
You're
to
welcome.
be with us.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.